Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll continue the discussion of Sota, and we'll begin with chapter 5, verse 20. Chapter 5, verse 20. And we gave a brief description yesterday for how Sota works and what will either be her remarkable punishment, or in the case that she's indeed guilty, or reward in the case that she's innocent. But it's really a remarkable thing. And that's what the Ramban comes in on. So if you look at the Ramban on Pasuk Chaf, it's about 10 lines into the Ramban on Pasuk Chaf, beginning with the words V'hinei ein. V'hinei ein b'chol mishpatei Torah davar toloi b'neis sulasi inyan hazeh. There's nothing in the Torah as dependent on miracle. In other words, God, there are obviously miraculous stories in the Torah, but halachos, this is what we're going to do. This is what's going to happen. Whatever day, whatever time, there's nothing as miraculous as this in the Torah in terms of instructions from God. Shu pela v'neis kavua. It's a wondrous thing, and it's a set miracle. Sheyasa b'Yisrael b'yosam ruba nosam etzonu shamakom. Now, if we try today, it's not going to work. It has to be that the majority of the Jewish people are doing the will of God. But if we've kind of hit that metric, then the Sota will work. Because God has this desire, He wants to create a deterrent that people not be unfaithful in their marriages, and to cleanse Israel of children born out of wedlock. Because if there's purity within the lineage of Klal Yisrael, then the Jewish people are fit for the divine presence to reside among them. Once the Jewish people got tripped up in numerous sins, the Sota doesn't work anymore. Like the Gemara says, once it became more common for people to commit adultery, so the waters of the Sota waters no longer were worked. Shenemar lo efkodal b'nosechem ki siznen avial kalosechem ki sino afna ki heimim azonos yipardu v'makdeshus yizabchu va'am lo yavin yilavet. So the idea is that if the Jewish people aren't as a whole diligent about these things, then God won't bring this miraculous means of enforcing the purity of the marriages of Klal Yisrael. I mean, the pasuk seems to say that God won't follow up on such things because the husbands are being unfaithful. So if the husbands are being unfaithful, why should we punish the wives? Says the Ramban, the pasuk doesn't mean to say that, hey, if the husbands are being unfaithful, the wives can do whatever they want. We're not saying that. Any of us who do mitzvos, God rewards us in one way or another. Any of us who do sins, God punishes us in one way or another. That's the way the world works. But the point is, this miracle of the Sota waters will not be in play if the Jewish people in general are not being diligent about this. Because the whole concept of Sota is to honor the Jewish people, and to establish themselves as a holy nation, or to maintain themselves as a holy nation. And if they hit a point where they're living a sinful life in general, they don't appreciate that. They don't want that. So then I'm not going to give it to them, said God. Skipping a few lines. This is the meaning at the pasuk at the end of the discussion of Sota. The man will be cleansed from sin. Meaning, says the Ramban, if the man is cleansed of sin, if the husband is not guilty of infidelity himself or inappropriate sexual conduct himself, then the waters will check his wife. If the man is committing similar sins, the waters won't even work. So that's what it means. At the end of the discussion of Sota, it says, the pshat, the straightforward meaning of the pasuk sounds like the man will be cleansed of sin. The Ramban says the intent of the pasuk is all this only works if the man is clean of sin. Okay. Vanikayon, what does it mean to be clean of sin here? It's a technical point that there's a period in this process that he's no longer allowed to be with his wife, who he's expressed suspicion of, and then she was in seclusion with someone. Okay, so but if he hasn't been diligent about that himself, about that halacha, then the sota waters won't work to help him. Some say that the pshat is that if the husband ever had a prohibited sexual intercourse throughout his life, that the waters won't work. Okay. So that's just an interesting Ramban to think about as a perspective on sota. Okay. Moving forward, we have the topic of Nazir, chapter 6, verse 11. Nazir is a person who undergoes certain vows. People can make all kinds of vows, but the Torah kind of prescribes. Nazir seems related to the word Nazer. Nazer is a crown, that there's like a crown of God on this person because they've devoted themselves in such a remarkable way. The classic models of being a Nazir are to not partake of wine or grape products, to not cut someone's hair, and to not allow oneself to become ritually impure in contact or exposure to a dead body. Now, generally speaking, or the rule is a Nazir for a certain period of time. The Torah discusses what happens once his Nazirus ends. And I should mention that the specific context that we're dealing with in this case is actually his Nazirus ended in an unplanned way because he was exposed to a dead body. So that's sort of like a violation of his Nazir vows. And in that case, there are various korbanos, various offerings he's supposed to bring. So jumping in on chapter 6, verse 11, V'yasah Kohen, and the Kohen does on behalf of the Nazir, echad l'chatos ve'echad li'olah. He brings one sin offering and one olah offering. Olah is a completely burnt offering. V'chiper alav, and the Kohen will bring atonement for him. Me'asher chata al hanafesh, from that which he sinned with this soul. V'kidashes rosho b'yomahu, and he sanctifies his head on that day. Okay. What was the sin of this person? What did he do wrong? Now, you might say that the pshat is he was exposed to a dead body. He's not supposed to do that. I do want to clarify, if you just glance back, I probably should have started with this verse. Glance back to verse 9. So it says in verse 9, and this is the context what we're talking about here. If someone dies upon him suddenly, he's at a public gathering, and someone right next to him, someone under the same roof, whatever it is, dies suddenly. So if you heard that story, would you say, that person was not careful. He did not take his Nazir vow seriously? Hard to believe. So what do we mean that he sinned? So look at Rashi. Rashi on Pasuk Yud Aleph, Masher Chatol HaNafesh. So the first pshat is Shlo Nizar Mitumas HaMeis, that he wasn't appropriately cautious about being exposed to the impurity of a dead body, which, to be honest with you, is a little bit difficult to understand. But that's the context. Maybe we mean that sometimes he's guilty. Maybe, it's hard to draw the line there. Let me ask you a question. Let's say it was a different situation. Let's say there was a person he was close with that was on his deathbed, and the Nazir wanted to visit him before he passed. It was a very nice sentiment. And then while the Nazir was there, the fellow passes. What would you say in that case? He wasn't intentionally exposing himself to impurity, but we would probably think very differently about that case than the first case we mentioned. So that seems to be the pshat according to, so therefore we're not going to start making distinctions because it will be an impossible set of distinctions to make. So on some level, many times, if not all times, many times he's probably guilty of not being sufficiently diligent, even if he didn't intend to be exposed to the impurity of a dead body. That's the first pshat. Rebbe Elazar HaKapar Omer, very famously quoted opinion, Shetzier Atzmo Min Hayayin. You know what the sin is? The The sin is that he became a Nazir in the first place. He took away the pleasure of wine. So we have this whole section of the Torah about what a person should do if he wants to become a Nazir, and we talk about the crown of God is upon his head. Rabbi Elazar HaKapper says it's all very nice, but when it's all over, he has to bring a siddur offering, because there's something not right about being a Nazir, because you're not allowing yourself to benefit from God's world in its entirety. That seems to be the basic idea. One opinion. Let's jump ahead to let's go to the Ramban on Pasuk Yud. Ramban on Pasuk Yud. And I should clarify that in verse 13 we had said that when the Nazir finishes his period, just because his period is up, he brings offerings. And we explained that one of the offerings is a sin offering. And so now, where it's not the context that he was exposed to a dead body. So if we look at the Ramban on Pasuk Yud, it's not clear, says the Ramban, why he's bringing the sin offering when his Nazir period is over. The Ramban says that the straightforward meaning would be that this person has tainted his soul in a way when the Nazir period is over. He, up until this point, has really distinguished himself in his sanctity and his service of God. It would have been appropriate for him to stay in that state forever. And should stay all of his days holy to God. So skipping a couple lines. So now he's going back. So now he's not a Nazir anymore. And now he's having his friends over for some wine. And it's not that it's a fundamental sin to have wine. Of course, it's permissible to have wine, but he was so holy. Last night, he wouldn't have even dreamt of sitting and having wine with his friends. He would sit and do this more spiritual, that more spiritual. Now he's having his friends over for wine. And the Ramban says it's a tragedy that he's going back to that life. So it's a fascinating difference of opinion. The Rashi cites an opinion that it's a sin offering because he chose that life for himself. The Ramban says it's a sin offering because he's leaving that life. So it's a fascinating thing to think about. So we discussed that, what the ideas of the sin offering, and we discussed the Ramban's description of why God would bring this halacha of sota with so many miracles and what the message is in that, and why it would stop working at a certain point.